I was once the beloved of a wealthy family's precious daughter, but tragically passed away due to an accident. In order to be reborn, I traversed countless worlds. Finally, in the 4th year after my death, I achieved rebirth. However, at this moment, a substitute in this world had already taken my place. He, bearing a face identical to mine, smugly provoked me. He said, "Everything that was yours is now mine." You arrived too late, but he didn't know. When someone deeply loved appears, everyone will abandon their principles and flock to that person. Chapter 1. I'm back, Mom. As I effortlessly pushed open the Wong family gate, I smiled and spoke to my mother sitting on the sofa. Just like every other time I returned home, it was ordinary and uneventful, but suddenly there was a loud crash, the sound of her teacup smashing onto the floor. In response, she let out a heart-wrenching wail, her voice trembling as she said, "George, my son is back. I am George, the eldest son of the Wong family. I died of heart failure, and in my final moments, I was bound by a rapid transmigration system. That's when I realized I was merely the beloved of a wealthy young lady in a substitute story who died prematurely. The real male lead is a substitute who looks 9 out of 10 like me. Because of our similar appearances, the Wong family took notice of him. In the end, my parents accepted him as their godson. My childhood sweetheart would become his girlfriend, and my sister would become his little fangirl. He would inherit everything I once had, wealth, women, everything on the condition that I was dead. So, after completing tasks in another world, when the system asked if I wanted to return and be resurrected, I didn't hesitate to agree. Why should my life's efforts be used as a stepping stone for someone else? Even my death's tragedy would serve as the starting point for another's happiness. So I came back, I said. "Mom, it's me. I'm back." My mother's embrace was as warm as always, but this time it felt a bit suffocating, as if she feared that the moment she let go, I would disappear. I sighed, gently patting her frail body to comfort her. The system had altered their memories, changing my death from unsuccessful rescue 4 years ago to being lost in a maritime disaster. She believed she had been searching for me day after day, year after year, now reunited. However, the tearful and heartfelt reunion didn't last long as noises from the doorway interrupted us. "Mom, look what I bought you," before anyone arrived, a greasy male voice echoed. The next second, a young man entered first, holding a box of snacks. Shortly after, a familiar, light female voice came with a hint of reproach. "Why the rush? Always in such a hurry." With just one sentence, I recognized her identity. Willow, my female friend who grew up with me. Another female voice chimed in. "Mom, are we expecting guests? Why are you crying?" This was my sister, Anna. She had already entered, but since I was facing away from her, she didn't recognize me immediately. All she saw was our mother clutching my arm and crying, and after a moment of confusion, she began to ask questions. I felt my mother grip my hand even tighter, her eyes reddened, lips trembling, wanting to speak, but unable to stop the endless flow of tears. My sister said, "Mom, please stop crying. What's going on? Who is this person?" The male voice spoke again. "Willow, what's wrong? Why are you squeezing me like that?" Willow seemed to sense something, her hopeful gaze falling on my back. She remained indifferent to the man's questions, even lightly biting her lips, trying to call out that familiar yet long estranged name. The man looked puzzled. "What's going on with you all today?" The security guard at the door said. "I just came back a moment ago. This is really strange." He frowned, looking at our crying mother, then at the silent sister, and finally at Willow, whose emotion seemed off. Finally, his gaze settled on me, and a bad feeling suddenly arose in his heart. As if to confirm this premonition, I slowly stood up, turned around, and looked at them. I said, "Anna, Willow, long time no see." Chapter 2. Willow called out to me. "George," her voice trembled barely audibly. Anna, however, was much more outspoken. She scolded me angrily. "George, you dare to come back? Where have you been all these years? Do you know, I really thought you were dead? How dare you? How dare you?" At 18, the young girl hadn't fully shed her childish innocence. Her words were harsh, but her little pearl's tears couldn't be controlled and kept falling one after another. Feeling guilty, I patted her on the head and said Anna has grown up. She was only 14 back then, and in the blink of an eye she had become a young woman. It seemed she couldn't hold back anymore. She buried her head in my chest, choking back tears and whispering softly, "Brother, I missed you so much." This reunion was filled with both joy and sorrow. It wasn't until the snack box fell to the ground that everyone noticed the men who had been standing silently at the doorway. I looked at him, the substitute with a face strikingly similar to mine, his complexion pale and his appearance disheveled and dreadful. We sat down together for a thoughtfully prepared dinner, each dish being one of my favorites. My mother kept serving me more food, and Anna insisted that I eat 3 bowls of rice. However, when Willow brought out the braised beef that had been simmering in the kitchen for a long time, everyone was stunned. It was my favorite dish, yet she instinctively placed it in front of Makoto. Makoto frowned and said, "Thank you, but Willow, you might have forgotten. I'm allergic to beef." This was the first time he spoke after learning about my true identity. "I'm sorry," Willow paused and replied lightly. I didn't pay attention to the undercurrents at the dinner table, calmly eating my meal. My mother said, "Your room hasn't changed at all. I clean it for you every day. Now that you're back, go get some rest. The doctor will come to check you later, and your father will be home tomorrow." Her endless chatter was her way of showing concern, and I responded accordingly. They didn't say much about Makoto, but I didn't mind. This was the confidence that comes from being deeply loved. However, I hadn't anticipated that if I didn't go, problems would automatically arise. Late at night, someone knocked on my bedroom door. I opened the door to find Makoto's familiar face. Holding a bottle of beer, I raised an eyebrow at him, somewhat surprised, thinking he might be trying to ease the awkwardness and hoping to share a drink. But instead, he abandoned his silence and restraint from the dinner, a mocking expression on his face. He said, "If you're dead, then you're dead. Why did you come back? Do you think you can fight me? After all, I've been pursuing them for 4 years. Everything you have, except for this room, is mine. You came back too late. Understand? Pursuing." It was a familiar term. As soon as he finished speaking, without waiting for my reaction, he grabbed the beer bottle, slammed it against his head with a loud bang, the bottle shattering and emitting a crisp sound. Then he howled loudly and collapsed to the ground. Through his sobs, he cried, "Big brother, I'm sorry. I just wanted to have a drink with you. I meant no harm." I was speechless. This type of plot twist in trope novels is indeed enduring. In that moment, I even found it somewhat amusing, watching the men lie on the ground in a pitiful state, his clothes disheveled, beer dripping from the corners of his eyes. His gaze towards me was full of humiliation. In short, his subdued and resigned demeanor truly deserved an award for Best Actor. In truth, I wasn't eager to argue with Makoto about anything. For whatever reason, he had been the one to comfort my family members over the years. I didn't hold much resentment towards him. I just wanted him to realize the difficulty and back off. But his hostility towards me was evidently significant. Noises at night are always particularly attention-grabbing, especially on a day like this. Everyone in the house had no intention of sleeping. So, when the beer bottle shattered, other doors began to open one after another. Chapter 3. Someone asked what happened. "Son, did you get injured?" My mother's face was pale as she hastily threw on a piece of clothing, anxiously wearing mismatched shoes. It wasn't until she saw me standing there perfectly fine that she let out a sigh of relief. Over the years, her sleep had never been good. She constantly had recurring nightmares, all filled with unsettling images. Makoto then replied, "Mom, I'm fine." After confirming my safety, Makoto's voice reached her ears. My mother frowned as she looked at the shards of glass beside Makoto and asked, "Child, what happened to you? How did you end up on the ground?" Before Makoto could respond, she spoke again. "How careless can you be? What if the broken bottle cut someone? Get up quickly." Makoto was speechless. He adjusted his emotions and sighed. It's my brother. It seemed he was about to put on a show again. My sister interrupted him. Bro, what's wrong with your hand? Anna clearly targeted me, pulling my hand. There was a small cut on the back of my hand with a tiny bit of blood, probably from a shard of the broken bottle, accidentally scraping it. It didn't hurt, nor did I feel anything else. But Anna looked worried enough to cry. She said, Brother, you're really careless. Didn't you even know you were hurt? She complained, gently blowing on it like she used to when we were kids, then quickly realized her overreaction. She said, Brother, I'll go get the first aid kit as she spoke. She tried to run away. My mother also approached, looking guilty as she said, Anna, hurry up. You're bleeding and your brother must be in pain. It's my fault. I didn't notice you were hurt. Makoto was ignored by everyone. He couldn't help but twist his face in frustration ever since he had clawed his way up from the bottom of society through deceit and manipulation. He hadn't felt the taste of defeat for a long time. My parents' concern, my girlfriend's thoughtfulness, and my sister's admiration all were easily within his grasp. He believed he was on the verge of winning over a rich and beautiful woman, reaching the pinnacle of his life. But now the person who was supposed to be dead had come back to life. I calmly said, Mom, I'm fine. It doesn't hurt. I noticed the resentment and jealousy in Makoto's demeanor, knowing he wouldn't let this go easily. When you possess something for a long time, you subconsciously believe it's yours when he thought it was his, only to realize it wasn't. The negative gap between his expectations and reality was hard to bear. So, in the next second, while my mother wasn't paying attention, he grabbed a piece of glass. His palm was drenched in fresh blood as he clenched his teeth and said, Mom, I'm bleeding too. He looked utterly miserable, trembling as he held out his palm, resembling a terminal patient saying their final goodbyes. I was left speechless. Anna. The first aid kit. I brought the first aid kit. Anna appeared just in time, seeing Makoto with blood all over his hands.
She paused.
Makoto quickly said, Sis, look, I won't get infected.
Right.
He took advantage of Anna being such a sensitive little girl, knowing she would be incredibly worried seeing this, especially since she always followed him around like a shadow, treating him like an older brother. Whenever he got hurt playing sports, she would carefully help bandage his wounds. As soon as he saw my sister hesitate for a moment, he began his act. Anna pressed her lips together, and the first aid kit in her hand was immediately taken by my mother. My mother hurriedly pulled me into my room, wanting to treat my wound, I said. Anna quickly helped Makoto up. I naturally understood that my mother and sister were ignoring him. Besides focusing more attention on me, they also didn't want me to feel uncomfortable because of Makoto. This stranger, after all, he had such a similar face. Calling her mom and sister, I wasn't stupid. I knew what he had been to our family during the years I was gone. My words surprised my mother. She paused, glanced back, and saw Anna carefully avoiding the glass shards. Supporting Makoto by the arm, Makoto shakily stood up. Mom, are you all avoiding me? Anna pressed her lips together without responding. He continued, I came here just to have a drink with my brother. To chat. But I don't understand why he's acting this way. He's so angry with me. Mom is avoiding me. And you, sis, do you all not want me to stay in this family? If there's something I did wrong, I can apologize to my brother. But all this time, I've truly treated Mom as my own mother and you as my own sister. I care about you all so much. Anna, she called him softly. Makoto froze, looking at Anna with a puzzled expression. Anna met his gaze with calm eyes, as if looking at a stranger. She said, George is my brother. Chapter 4. With just that one sentence, Makoto understood her meaning. George is her brother, not him. So his constant reference to brother was incorrect. George is her brother. So she unconditionally trusts George, and she wouldn't believe a single word he says. Makoto furrowed his brow, looking disappointed, and said, What about me? Anna, what do these 3 years between us siblings mean? But you used to call me brother before. His voice was hoarse, his tone low. Anna denied it. I never did. I never called you brother. She never referred to Makoto as her brother, except the first time they met when she thought it was me who had returned. Makoto was taken aback, seemingly recalling the situation. He searched his memory and realized that Anna was mostly silent. He had thought she was just too shy and didn't like to speak. He didn't expect that she had always been able to distinguish between the real George and him from the beginning, sparing a single word of brother. But he didn't believe it. After 3 years of living together day and night, with even the system acknowledging their bond, Anna wouldn't have any feelings for him at all. So he murmured to himself, "Aren't we family?" This time, Anna didn't respond. She gave Makoto a deep look before turning and walking into the house. Makoto's expression shifted several times before he finally fell silent and walked in as well. This was his first time entering the room that had been off-limits ever since he became the Wong family's adopted son. This room was completely different from his own. It was spacious and bright. He had always thought that one day he would move in as the master and become the Wong family's heir. But in the end, it was the true owner who opened the door. My wound had already been treated, and I hadn't ignored the noises at the door. I said, "This gentleman's wound probably needs treatment too." I paused and saw that my sister didn't even glance at him, so I took the initiative to say, "Sis, why don't you do me a favor and help him out? The first aid kit is here." I spoke proactively, gently and kindly, presenting the most familiar demeanor to Anna's memory. She obediently nodded, "All right, bro." Anna didn't refuse and followed through, but Makoto felt humiliated. He thought I was provoking him, asserting who the real Wong family heir was. His sinister gaze kept flickering toward me. However, I seemed oblivious. Continuing to talk to my mother said, "The doctor said your body is severely depleted. You need to rest well. If anything feels uncomfortable, make sure to tell me. Understand?" I smiled and replied, All right, I'll listen to Mom. Don't worry too much. I'm already an adult." My mother responded, "No matter how old you and Anna get, you'll always be my children here." How can a mother not worry about her own kids? My mother was a loving parent, but she rarely expressed herself so straightforwardly. I felt a bit melancholy, thinking about the relentless tasks I had to complete in unfamiliar worlds to achieve resurrection. I died once after another through all the hardships. What kept me going was the belief in returning home. I thought I was strong enough, but my mother's simple words still made my heart ache unbearably. "Ah!" Makoto shouted loudly, breaking the moment. He was drenched in cold sweat, looking very much in pain. Makoto had inflicted severe damage on himself. The cut on his palm was deep, with so many glass shards inside that removing them wasn't easy. Anna's actions weren't gentle at all. Anna snorted coldly. "A grown man, really?" She rolled her eyes and continued nonchalantly picking at his wound. Next, Makoto clenched his teeth and stayed silent. When the pain became too much, he fiercely twisted his other thigh. Soon, Anna had bandaged his wound completely. I wearily rubbed my temples, and my mother noticed my movement. She spoke up, "It's very late. Everyone should go to bed. We can discuss anything else tomorrow." Originally, Makoto seemed like he still had something to say, but seeing that everyone had stood up, he swallowed his words back. Anna packed up her things and got up before leaving. She didn't forget to say to me, "Good night, brother." I smiled and gently replied, "Good night, Anna. See you tomorrow." Instead of good night, "See you tomorrow" felt more hopeful. Anna's steps became noticeably lighter. My mother left the room with Makoto, and I knew they probably still had things to discuss. As expected, shortly after I closed my eyes, I heard a voice. My experience as a tasker had granted me some unusual abilities and talents. "Makoto, is your hand okay?" It was my mother's gentle voice. Shortly after, a hoarse, deep male voice responded. He spoke with an overwhelming sense of loss. "Mom, I thought you wouldn't recognize me as your son."
I was really in pain just now.
"My hand isn't too bad. But why are you all ignoring me? I'm your son too." He wasn't wrong. Being an adopted son still made him a son. My mother replied, "George just returned after suffering for so many years. I wanted to take better care of him a bit more."
You understand, right?
"You are both my children. And of course, I love you both the same. Besides, you've been by my side for so many years. How could I not recognize you? Silly child, don't overthink it. I'll call a doctor tomorrow. Your hand needs proper bandaging to prevent scarring. My mother changed her indifferent demeanor towards Makoto that she had shown in front of me, suddenly seeming like a completely different person. I couldn't help but frown, not understanding my mother's intentions until Makoto spoke again. I knew Mom would be worried about me too. Brother has such a terrible temper. I didn't mean anything by it. I just wanted to have a drink and chat with him. But he feels such deep animosity towards me, and even deliberately. My mother interrupted him. Yes, Makoto is a kind-hearted person. I'll talk to George properly and apologize on his behalf. Tomorrow, I'll check the surveillance to see who isn't doing their job properly. George said you suddenly tripped and fell at his door, causing both of you to get injured. My mother cut Makoto off, continuing on her own. Her tone was slightly unpleasant. Seemingly genuinely irritated by the servant's carelessness, Makoto was taken aback. Surveillance? Why was there such a thing at the door? No wonder Anna didn't believe his story earlier. He quickly corrected himself. No, I was just clumsy and tripped on my own.
Mom.
Please don't trouble yourself. I'll be more careful next time. I'm sorry I caused my brother to get hurt too. Makoto suppressed his fabricated story. He thought to himself that since my mother still had feelings for him, he couldn't undermine himself. My mother seemed somewhat surprised and asked, "Is that so?" He replied, "Yes. Yes, I'll apologize to my brother tomorrow. It's all my fault. I'm still so reckless even though I'm grown up." Makoto was surprisingly flexible, but perhaps due to his years of success, he saw this minor incident as nothing significant and didn't care much. Chapter 6. A mechanical electronic voice sounded, and the system spoke. "Host, are you feeling sad?" The outside had long returned to silence, and I was still pondering over the conversation between my mother and Makoto. My mother clearly didn't seem to have much affection for Makoto, so why was she so concerned about him behind the scenes? Every word had a deeper meaning, seemingly caring for him, but in reality, aiming to favor me and Makoto. Why did he so easily believe my mother's words? I also recalled him using the term to pursue or strategize for a relationship. Does he, like me, have something like a system? Before I could figure it out, the system, which had already been unbound, sounded in my mind. Asking if I was feeling sad, I paused, somewhat bewildered, and retorted, "Why are you back?" It said, "I still want to see if the life you chose is not as good as listening to me back then. Didn't you choose immortality by not coming back?" I replied, "No, only here is where I belong." I shook my head, denying the system's words. It continued, "That your mother has already acknowledged another son. Like in all previous worlds, you will eventually be replaced by a substitute. No, perhaps you have already been replaced. I sent it better for the best person to live in memories, cherished forever." The system didn't quite understand human emotions. It could only analyze based on reality, I said. "No, I believe my mother." I thought to myself, a mother's love for her child cannot be faked. She loves me deeply, I firmly believe. This conversation with the system ended with its silence. I knew it hadn't left yet. The night grew quieter, and I felt sleepy, closing my eyes more than my body. It was my soul that was exhausted. Every death wasn't the end, but the repetitive cycle of pain was something I had truly felt. Makoto said, "Willow, are you here to find me?" When I saw Willow's figure, Makoto couldn't wait and rushed over to embrace her. With my mother's comforting words from last night, he felt he hadn't lost. It was just that the impact of his first love's return was stronger. Over time, it would eventually become a lingering presence. So, he was confident when facing Willow as well. I watched the couple holding each other not far away, and my steps came to a halt. Makoto had a doting expression as he said, "I've reserved a table at your favorite restaurant for 7 o'clock tonight," as he spoke. He casually lifted his bandaged hand, continuing, "But I might need to trouble you to drive. My hand got a bit injured yesterday." If it were the past, Willow would have definitely questioned how he got injured. However, this time, Willow merely frowned and stepped out of his embrace. She said, "I'm sorry, Makoto. I'm not here to see you today, she continued. George, can we talk when you have time? She looked up and met my gaze. I raised an eyebrow, glanced at Makoto, who was filled with hostility towards me, and smiled in agreement. I said,
Sure.
For the first time, Willow declined Makoto's invitation, giving me a chance to be alone with her at the cafe. We sat in silence, the quiet stretching until I thought she simply wanted me to buy her a cup of coffee. She pressed her lips together and said, I thought after so long apart, you'd have a lot to say to me. She sighed softly. I stopped stirring my coffee and looked up at her, asking what do you want to say? She frowned and whispered, George, you're still the same straight guy as before. Always so direct. She took a sip of her coffee, lowered her head, and continued. About Makoto.
I'm sorry.
She was referring to her treating Makoto as my substitute. She looked up, eyes filled with grievance, and continued, I'll break up with him. George, is there still a chance for us? I put down my coffee cup and smiled faintly. There's no chance. I decisively rejected her. Willow was stunned for a moment. She didn't understand why I gave such an answer. For years ago, I had persistently pursued her, and we were only one formal confession away from being together.
Why? She almost instinctively asked.
I replied, Of course, it's because I don't like you anymore. I answered effortlessly, having witnessed so many similar scenarios over the years of transmigration. At this moment, it even felt a bit boring. This was a farewell that ended on a sour note, but I quickly brushed it off from my mind. Chapter 7. But someone was very concerned. In the study, Makoto appeared mysteriously in front of my desk. He asked, Are you having a good time chatting with someone else's girlfriend? Isn't it exciting? I paused my hand from flipping the book and looked up at him. I asked, Aren't you tired of this? He had two faces in front of others. He was a warm and affectionate guy, but towards me, he was full of provocation. He laughed.
Tired.
Why would I be tired? As long as I play your role well, I can live the same life as you. It's incredibly easy, but I just don't understand why you're still alive. He squinted his eyes, shedding all his disguises, making his face appear detestable. Whatever happens to me has nothing to do with you. What isn't yours won't be yours. What you've gained through acting won't last long. Why not just be yourself? Those who recognize the times are heroes. If you're willing to step aside, I can give you some money. Don't get me wrong. I'm doing this for your own good. Leaving now with the money is in your best interest. Before things could escalate, I was willing to show some mercy. However, I had no interest in backing down and letting him step over me to rightfully become the Wong family's prince. He gritted his teeth. Your high and mighty attitude is really annoying. In the end, it's all hypocrisy.
You must really hate me inside, he said.
George, are you jealous of me, or are you scared? As he spoke, Makoto couldn't help but laugh loudly, as if he had uncovered a hidden weakness of mine. He continued, George, you're not as confident as you think. You're scared. You're scared that even if you come back in the end, they will still choose me. After all, during these missing years, it was me who was by their side day and night.
Ha ha ha.
Makoto became more convinced of his point. His eyes and brows were filled with satisfaction. I was speechless. I hate clever fools. Since that's the case, there's nothing more to discuss. I looked at his similar face, showing an expression I would never have, and, unable to tolerate it any longer, he said, Of course, I'll fight you to the end, George. I, Makoto, will never lose. I understand his tactics best. Just wait and see. With these defiant words, his demeanor exuded arrogance. Almost simultaneously with his declaration of war, I started experiencing Mercury retrograde, occasionally encountering minor misfortunes. At first, I didn't pay much attention until a car accident nearly broke my leg. Fortunately, thanks to my innate talent, I dodged in time. A near-miss accident brought tears to my mother's eyes. Shaking with fear, I began to stay alert. Sure enough, on my birthday party, another accident occurred. This was the first birthday I had celebrated in 4 years, and also the first homecoming celebration. Friends from my previous circles attended, toasting and reminiscing with me. Compared to my side, Makoto's side was much quieter. After all, an adopted son couldn't compare to a biological one, especially being a substitute. Whether in terms of emotions or value, these high society offspring preferred to socialize with me, Makoto said. Big brother, I'll toast to you in front of everyone. Makoto appeared honest and straightforward. I didn't take his glass of alcohol. Instead, I took the one on the waiter's tray, he said. Then I'll drink the same as my big brother. With a barely noticeable glance, I wanted to maintain the facade of our staged interaction. Slightly nodding my chin in agreement, he took the initiative to toast me. This battle between the real protagonist and the substitute seemed unsurprisingly in my favor. But I knew Makoto wasn't someone who would give up easily. Almost as soon as he made a move, I signaled with my eyes for someone to follow him. Before long, shouts erupted. Makoto's face twisted in fury, his clothes disheveled, stumbling and staggering out of Anna's room. My heart tightened until a waiter passing by shoved something into my palm, finally calming me down. Chapter 8. He angrily accused. George, why did you drug my drink? As soon as Makoto finished speaking, he passed out and someone immediately called for a doctor. All the guests present turned to look at me with strange glances because of his outburst. Some even exchanged looks, considering leaving to avoid offending anyone. However, at that moment I decided to speak up. I said, "Ladies and gentlemen, there's no need to rush to leave. I'm also very curious about what Mr. Ito means by drugging. Whether it's right or wrong isn't just empty talk. I, George, will not accept this dirty water." As my words caused the room to quiet down, Makoto was lifted onto the table. The arriving doctor quickly began treating him, but within minutes, Makoto regained consciousness. As soon as he opened his eyes and saw me, he clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. "I've broken up with Willow, but you still won't let me go. I know you hate me and think I'm unworthy of being your substitute, but I've always treated you as my real big brother and Anna, such a young girl. How could you bear to hurt her?" Thank goodness I controlled myself. Otherwise, even though I'm an adopted son, siblings getting involved would be a huge scandal. His words were filled with deceit and provocation, aiming not only to drive a wedge between my family and me, but also to tarnish my reputation. The guests began to discuss among themselves. Is George really this kind of person? He doesn't seem like it. Who knows? After all these years of him being missing, there's a complete blank. Maybe he's picked up some bad habits outside. People can change. I actually feel sorry for this, Mr.
Ito.
Sure enough, when it came to matters of family inheritance and interests, some guests began to waver and the murmurs grew louder. Willow said, "George, why are you taking your anger out on him because of me? What's wrong with Makoto? It's my fault for treating him as your substitute. You should be seeking revenge against me. And you even want to hurt your own little sister. George, you really disgust me." She stood on a moral high ground, scolding me harshly. I felt nothing but boredom. I said, "Are you crazy? Have you had enough of pretending?" I impatiently looked up, not understanding the purpose of every small world having to go through such trashy female drama. The next second, Makoto looked behind me as if he had seen reinforcements. He said, "Mom, my big brother is trying to hurt me, to hurt Anna." I turned around to see my mother. I opened my mouth to speak, but she interrupted me for the first time.
She said, "Enough.
Stop arguing. I don't want to hear it." I was stunned because I knew she was talking to me. My trusted mother, for the first time, stood against me. Was she helping that substitute? But why was her hand trembling slightly beside her? The system spoke. "See, I told you. You can't compete with the male lead."
Host.
"I'm willing to give you another chance. Rebind with me. As long as you disappear, everyone who betrayed you will regret it and cherish your memory. This is the best punishment." The system's voice, filled with manipulative intent, sounded again. After being silent for so long, it still hadn't given up persuading me. "Shut up." I Angrily rebuked it in my mind. I asked Makoto, "Why did you do that again?" I looked at Makoto with a heavy gaze. He saw our mother scolding me for his sake and was looking quite smug.
He said, "Of course, I drugged your drink."
"You didn't want to take my glass, so I guided you to take another one. Isn't that what I wanted?" "Big brother, I really didn't expect you to hate me so much. Even going as far as hurting Anna. She's your real little sister. You're so cold-blooded." Makoto was clearly trying to play the victim in front of everyone, but when he looked at me, his gaze was filled with blatant provocation and pity. He seemed to think I was already defeated. However, the next second, Anna, who had said she wasn't feeling well and was resting in her room, suddenly walked in dressed appropriately. She said, "Thank you so much for standing up for me. I just brought a gift for my brother. Can someone tell me what happened?" She held a delicate gift box in her hand, clearly not lying. Everyone was stunned. Since Anna wasn't in the room earlier, Makoto's messy exit from Anna's room must have been staged. Chapter 9. Makoto was also stunned. Although the room hadn't been lit, he clearly felt someone there. The next second, a female voice sounded. "Ito, sir, was so hasty just now." Turns out he mistook the person. A young woman walked out of Anna's room. Her every move was full of flirtatious charm, her clothes disheveled, and her lipstick slightly smudged from kissing. This was Anna's friend, the socialite Maria, famous in our circle. Taking advantage of everyone's attention being diverted, I grabbed Anna's phone and inserted the memory card the waiter had shoved into my palm. The video inside showed Makoto's staged scenes. I said, "The drugging you mentioned. Is it this?" I pulled out the footage which showed Makoto sprinkling powder into my drink after toasting me. He had also deliberately had the servant deliver water to Anna under the pretext of caring for her, with drugs added to the water. At the right moment, he entered Anna's room. But he didn't expect that the person sleeping in the room wasn't Anna, so he didn't drink the water. Instead, Maria, being the hospitable girl she was, ended up kissing him. Makoto loudly said, "This can't be right. This video is fake." He widened his eyes, desperately denying it, but his mind was frantically calling the system. Makoto said to the system, "System, didn't you promise to help me block all videos? What are you doing? Do you even know who your real master is?" I was stunned. The voice was coming from his mind, but I could hear it. His called system had not responded, but I sensed a familiar energy fluctuation. Seeing the mocking gazes about to drown him, Makoto hurriedly said, "Mom, my mother," as if receiving a command, suddenly spoke. "Enough, George. Makoto is just being immature. Just joking with you. Don't argue with him." I couldn't imagine such a split voice coming from my most trusted mother. Anna looked resentful, raised her wine glass to throw it at Makoto, but I hurriedly grabbed her to prevent her from acting out. Guests showed various expressions, but Makoto was delighted, saying, "Yes, big brother, it was just a joke, a childish prank. You won't mind, right? I just wanted to strengthen the brotherly bond. I won't dare to do it next time." He grinned shamelessly. Nobody would believe such a far-fetched excuse, but since my mother said so, no one dared to say anything openly. I laughed. Of course I don't mind if it were in a circus. I might even cheer more. I dropped that line and led Anna, who was about to lose her temper, to leave first. Anna complained, "I really don't understand her. Why does she talk to that person? They always said Makoto was your substitute. I thought she couldn't bear the pain of losing you, so she found someone to rely on. She wanted a harmonious family, and I went along with her play. But now that you've returned, what is she doing? Treating her biological son like this just for the sake of the adopted son." Anna pouted her lips high. As an immature girl, she couldn't understand much about emotions. She just felt that her mother was helping an outsider suppress her brother. I laughed. "Don't be angry. Your pouted lips are so high they can hang a bottle. Actually, I'm fine. Makoto is only capable of this. He can't compete with me.
Don't worry, sis."
I patted her head, signaling her to calm down. She said, "But Mom," I said, "All right, I'll handle this. You might as well tell me about what happened these past few years while I was gone." I thought to myself, Why did the plot differ from what I knew in advance? Anna pressed her lips together and nodded. Mom, were you dreaming again? Late at night, when my mother came to check on me in my room, I opened my eyes and called out to her. This wasn't the first time she had secretly come to see me at midnight, but it was the first time I didn't pretend to be asleep. I had only learned today from Anna that she used to have recurring nightmares and poor sleep until Makoto arrived, after which things slowly began to improve. She seemed surprised to see me awake and hesitated before opening her mouth, her eyes filled with undeniable worry. In the end, she stammered, "I'm sorry." That single word made all my doubts vanish, replaced by an overwhelming sense of heartache. I said, "Mom, you have nothing to apologize for. I know you have your reasons, right?" She choked up, her tears streaming down her cheeks as she gently touched my hair. I appeared calm on the outside, but inside my heart was in turmoil. Did she mean she could see every time I died? The thought was suffocating. But how could an ordinary person possess such a power? She continued. George's death is so painful. If it were possible, I would never want my child to go through this. But I'm a useless mother, only able to watch you die in different ways without being able to help. Her tears rolled down her face as she lovingly stroked my hair. I maintained a calm demeanor, though my heart was shattered by her revelation. It seemed she could perceive my every death, and the impact it had on her must be immense. However, an ordinary person couldn't possibly have such abilities.
She said,
My greatest wish is for you to have a safe and smooth life. Everything else, leave it to me. These were the last words my mother left me with that night. One night talk left me deeply unsettled. Since my mother spoke to Makoto last time, he had become increasingly arrogant, no longer bothering to maintain any facade with me. Of course, he wasn't easy to provoke. Makoto hadn't gained anything beneficial from our interactions. The most recent conflict occurred when he barged into my study to snatch the box of cigars my brother had given me. He leaned his legs on the back of the chair, puffing smoke and looking quite pleased with himself.
He said,
Big brother, these things are really nice. Good things should be shared. Why keep them hidden? I responded, Didn't anyone tell you that taking without asking is stealing? Put it down and get out of this room right now. Makoto stopped pretending. Naturally, I didn't greet him with a smile. He replied, I won't put it down. I want this box of cigars. Otherwise, you'll have to ask Mom if I can take it with that. Makoto tried to take the box and leave. I grabbed his collar and shouted,
Put it down.
He sneered, trying to break free. The next second, I pulled him by the collar, quickly pressing his head down and smashing him onto the table. He had just leaned his legs on. You can't understand what I'm saying. I cursed angrily. Makoto was terrified. He never expected me to always be gentle. Now he was acting physically upon disagreement. Realizing this, he yelled, Let me go.
How dare you hit me?
I won't let you go. I clicked my tongue, expressionless, pressing his head down while he wailed, repeatedly smashing onto the table. George, I'm going to kill you, he shouted.
He spoke to the system.
System. You useless. He violated the rules. You must eliminate him now. Last time you told me it was because the affection level was over, so you couldn't activate the video blocking function. But this time you have no excuse, right? Suddenly my arm felt numb. All my suspicions were confirmed at that moment. The system had indeed betrayed me. Or rather, Makoto and I had been bound to the same system from the beginning. Hurting another tasker bound to the same system was against the rules and would result in punishment. The system spoke to him. George has unbound from the system. He's not a tasker, and the system has no authority to eliminate him. It was the familiar voice of the system, but now it was emanating from Makoto. Chapter 11. This farce was eventually discovered by a servant who called my mother over in the living room. Makoto played the victim, making accusations while I sat across from him with a cold expression, closing my eyes to avoid looking at him. My mother suddenly spoke. Since you two can't get along, George, you should go abroad. Makoto is such a filial child. After all these years, I've grown accustomed to him being by my side. The living room fell silent instantly. I opened my eyes and saw Makoto wearing a smug expression, although my mother was speaking to him. Her eyes held nothing but coldness. Makoto was too happy to notice her true feelings. Her words were like a victory trumpet for him. When people are overly triumphant, they often overlook critical information, I said.
Fine.
I glanced at my mother, remained silent for a long time, and finally uttered just that one word. In the next second, Makoto provocatively mimicked a loser face towards me. The decision for me to go abroad was thus made. Makoto was eager to announce to the world that he had won. The circle buzzed with discussions. Anna was so angry that she refused to come home, but it didn't change anyone's decision. I said, "System, I figured it out. I'm willing to rebind with you. I want to make them regret it. Maybe you're right. The perfect person is only worth remembering in memories." I looked down and forced a bitter smile. Silence followed, with no response from the system. I continued, "Even you abandoned me. Maybe I shouldn't have been resurrected in the first place." I murmured sadly. Time passed by second, and the familiar voice rang out again. The system said, "Host George, would you like to rebind with System 933? Please confirm yes or no." My eyes flickered slightly, but I feigned delight. I said, "Great. You're still here," it replied. "Yes, host, I've always been here," I said. "You were right. Human emotions are too fickle." I lost to my own substitute. "What about you? Will you betray me?" I tested calmly. The system paused for a few seconds before continuing. "The system cannot betray the host, otherwise it will be destroyed." I suddenly remembered the day 4 years ago when I first bound with the system to gain my trust. It had told me where the destruction key was. I had been so focused on resurrecting that I trusted it completely. It asked again, "Host George, do you choose to rebind?" Repeating the question, I chose yes. The binding process began. I suddenly asked, "Is Makoto also your tasker?" It replied, "Yes." It seemed surprised that I could perceive this, but now that I agreed to rebind and had no longer any conflict of interest with Makoto, it had nothing to hide. Moreover, the system's rules stated that it could not lie to its own host. It turned out to be a clone of Makoto's main system, specifically created to deceive me and drain my luck, allowing Makoto to take over my life. It had originally believed I would die in the task world, never expecting me to complete my task successfully and return alive. The system had no authority to eliminate me and could only fulfill its promise to resurrect me. However, when I returned to the original world and met Makoto, my luck surged as if returning home, attracting everyone's attention toward me. Makoto had thought it wouldn't be a problem. With the system's backing and the high affection level he had accumulated over the years, he believed that even if I returned, he couldn't be outdone. But my destructive power was too great. After just a few encounters, he had failed miserably to eliminate me as an obstacle. He had to persuade the system to bind me and leave this world. Thus, the plot where I died early and was replaced was all fake. Just to satisfy Makoto's desire for my life and the system's need for luck, he had been targeting me ever since I entered this world. I asked, "Does my mother's change in attitude have anything to do with you? Did you intentionally let her see the scenes of my death in the small worlds, or did you and your side induce her to side with Makoto?" The system remained silent, merely speeding up the binding process without providing a more definitive answer. The system said, "Binding progress 80, 90, 99, 100 host.
We can leave now.
Since you've decided to abandon the past, leave it here. Additionally, the original host has chosen to unbind. From now on, I will only be your system." It seemed that once Makoto learned I was willing to rebind, he had unbound his own system and chosen to remain in this world permanently. Originally, his mission in this world was just to become the Wong family's adopted son, which he had already accomplished. However, he had been dragging it out all these years, unwilling to leave and too afraid to unbind and stay. Now he had made his choice. Just as I was worried about falling asleep, someone brought me a pillow. I said, "Thank you for answering me, System 933. I will no longer trust a betrayer." I mentally located the destruction key indecisively and swiftly pressed it. In the next second, The system space in my mind flashed red lights, codes flew chaotically, and everything was on the verge of collapsing. System 933 experienced betrayal for the first time. It said, "You will regret this." I replied, "I won't." Chapter 12. Brother, I stopped Mom. The phone rang and I answered it, hearing Anna's voice trembling with residual fear. Upon hearing the news, I breathed a sigh of relief, grabbed my keys, and ran out. I said, "You handled it very well. Don't panic, I'm coming right now." When I arrived at the abandoned warehouse, Makoto was lying in the dirty mud with his mouth gagged, and my mother was shaking her hands with eyes full of hatred. However, Anna was preventing her from taking further action, my sister said. "Mom, this is illegal. You can't do this. Staring at me won't help." My mother gritted her teeth and snarled, "If he doesn't die, your brother must die. Do you understand?" Anna froze, looking bewildered. My mother commanded, "Move aside." She pushed Anna to continue attacking Makoto, but I hurriedly grabbed her. I said, "Mom," she responded, "why are you here? Get out of here. This doesn't concern you. George, listen to Mom and live well." Upon seeing me, my mother looked horrified and shoved me to leave. I replied, "Mom, it's okay. It's all over now. Listen to me." So I told her the secrets of my 4-year disappearance, the process of being bound to the system, our previous conversations, and the system's destruction. My mother, choking up, said, "I knew it. Such coincidences don't exist. George, I'm sorry." She tightly embraced me, crying uncontrollably, and Anna also had tears welling up in her eyes as she listened. Makoto was brought into the Wong family 3 years ago by Willow. Initially, my mother despised this person who looked so much like me and was disgusted by Willow's substitution behavior. Her son was unique. Even if there were thousands of people who looked similar, I was irreplaceable. After my disappearance, she began suffering from insomnia and nervous exhaustion. But after meeting Makoto, she suddenly started dreaming of various scenes of my death. A voice told her that only by treating Makoto well and sincerely considering him as her real son could her child have a chance to return. At first, she didn't believe it, but as those scenes became more frequent and intense, she began to approach Makoto with a hopeful attitude. As expected, her condition improved as if she saw hope. She treated Makoto better, and everyone thought she was emotionally attaching herself to the substitute. However, every sleepless night, she secretly prayed for her child to return to her side. Finally, shortly after officially adopting Makoto, I truly returned with just one glance. My mother could distinguish the difference between Makoto and me, and in that instant, she cried uncontrollably. I thought this was the perfect ending, but that voice began to appear again, saying that ignoring Makoto would cause me to continue facing misfortunes. And indeed, I started experiencing a series of small mishaps one after another. So she tried to treat me well openly, and in private care a little for Makoto to prevent me from noticing him. But it didn't help at all until that car accident shattered her lucky streak, forcing her to maintain Makoto's image in public as well. She followed the instructions, and indeed the situation improved. My mother was completely cold. She always believed that the ultimate beneficiary was the one who initiated everything. She couldn't let me suffer all my life, so she decided to send me abroad, lower Makoto's vigilance, and personally eliminate this threat. That voice must have been the system's hypnosis. After my mother's disappearance, her mental state was very poor, and she was likely exploited when she was mentally weak. Chapter 13. Makoto woke up, glanced around in terror, and then directed his gaze toward us, desperately seeking help. The sudden commotion caught my attention, so I turned to look, but Anna screamed. "Where did Makoto go? Where is he?" The man lying on the ground had a completely unfamiliar face, a face I had never seen before, I said. "He is Makoto." Anna was stunned, but my mother didn't seem too surprised. Now that she was free from any restraints, she no longer had to feign politeness with the imposter. She merely glanced at him indifferently before withdrawing her attention. Anna stepped forward and tore off the tape from Makoto's mouth. Makoto exclaimed, "Mom, it's George who wants to kidnap me. Please save me." However, in the next second, my sister saw him slandering me, so she quickly put the tape back on, earning a harsh glare from Makoto. My sister said, "Can't you speak properly? We're a family here to rescue you. Don't be ungrateful. If you can't speak anymore, we'll leave you alone here in the abandoned warehouse. Those vicious bandits might come back." Anna was subtly threatening him. Naturally, kidnapping would be done by hired people, and Makoto hadn't seen the face of the other person involved. The Wang family tried various maneuvers, but he couldn't find any evidence. Upon hearing this, Makoto's expression softened, showing pleading eyes, and Anna ripped the tape off his mouth once more. In the end, the kidnapping matter was left unresolved, and the Wang family didn't even spread the news. When Makoto returned from the hospital, no one recognized him. His face no longer bore any resemblance to the Makoto they knew. He declared, "I am the second young master of the Wang family. Do you know who I am? Let me in now." The security guards responded, "Enough with the fake acts. Who doesn't recognize the second young master of the Wang family? Do you think we're blind?" The villa's main gate remained closed as Makoto was escorted out by security. He shouted, "I really am Makoto." He was so angry that his nose was crooked, and no one paid him any attention until he saw Willow visiting. He hurried over and said, "Willow, they all won't let me go home. It must be George's orders." Willow, confused, asked, "Who are you?" He replied, "I'm Makoto. Why don't you recognize me anymore?" Makoto, frustrated, then touched his face and exclaimed, "My face. What's wrong with my face?" Finally, he looked into a reflective glass and saw his own forgotten face, a face that belonged solely to him. Long forgotten. Makoto went completely mad. He couldn't accept this reality and stumbled away, running as far as he could. Willow thought she had encountered a madman and didn't pay much attention. She had come today to apologize to George. She didn't understand why he said such things before. Their childhood bond had been exhausted, but she still wanted to offer George an apology. I didn't accept her apology, and she left with tears streaming down her face. Later, when I heard about her again, it was related to Makoto once more. Makoto could never accept returning to his original appearance, but the system would never come back. He didn't want to take revenge on me, but he was always caught in the act. Helpless. He turned his attention to Willow, wanting to start over, but without that familiar face, Willow didn't recognize him. After some entanglement and tugging, both ended up in a car accident. Willow injured her leg, and Makoto was directly hit and became mentally incapacitated. I scrolled through my phone, looking at the news headlines, raising my eyebrows.
It was deserved.
"George, dinner's ready." My mother came out from the kitchen carrying a pot of soup. My sister yawned sleepily, and I got up saying, "Coming." The moonlight outside was perfect, peaceful, and serene.